Welcome back to Counterculture, where we go against the grain just by existing.
Go against the grain.
Right? That's a great chasing it. Go against
the grain.
Are you going against the grain?
Are you going against the grain? Are you with the grain?
With the grain. Makes me
Wow.
makes me want to preach it.
Preach it.
Peter talks about it. So I want to dig into 1 Peter chapter 4. If you could read like the first 6 verses for me, and I'll only pick out the phrase that I want.
Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because he who suffered in his body is done with sin. As a result, he does not live the rest of his earthly life for the evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do, living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry. They think it is strange that you do not plunge with them into the same flood of dissipation and they heap abuse on you. But they will have to give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is the reason the gospel was preached, even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to men in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to the spirit.
All right, so I was looking at this, and obviously, if we were going to pick a theme verse for this show, Counterculture, you could present 1 Peter chapter 4, these verses
right there,
as part of that.
Yeah.
But the verse that really stuck out to me, right? Again, I get Christ did this for us so that we can fight against sin and be different. But if you look at verse 4, I love what your version said, plunge, but mine says, with respect to this, they are surprised when you don't join with them in the same flood of debauchery, right? We were talking about it this morning as a bunch of pastors, this whole idea that people want comfortability and they fight for comfortability. When conviction comes anywhere near them, I said that they will destroy the messenger so they don't have to listen to the message. You just did a counterculture on Elijah. A lot of the prophets of the Old Testament, this was the thinking of the Israelites. Kill the prophet and we don't have to be responsible for the message, right? But this whole idea that people should think it strange that we are not joining with them in what they are doing. When I first started thinking about this, I was actually thinking about the whole tattoo thing. And the fact that there's always this argument that I need to have tattoos so that I can minister to people, right? So I can join. And it just gives me this idea of a current flowing by, and I have to jump into the current and flow with everybody.
Yeah.
When God asks us to step in and fight against the current. Now, you have been going through and talking through some of this stuff, and may have even talked about this on Sunday to some degree, about this idea of people being comfortable and conforming and all of these things. So give me some thoughts on this whole idea of we're supposed to be against the current, but our flesh really wants to go with the current.
Well, I'm reminded of a quote from a former elder, pastor in my denomination. He was in my church, a wonderful man. And he said, the job of the church, he was talking about the board, but the church as a whole too. The purpose of the church is to change the culture, not the culture change the church.
Yeah.
And the problem is we are very much like the Israelites. Why did they want a king? Because everybody else had one.
Yep, we want to be like everybody else.
Want to be like everybody else. And is the pressure not honestly, well, you need to you need to just accept this, and you need to be more accepting of this stuff. And yet, well, the church shouldn't be so so exclusive. It's supposed to be inclusive, but it is exclusive
By nature.
right? By nature, it's just like any organization is. There's an exclusiveness to it, and too many times we want the rules changed. The church seems to be the only organization that they expect the rules to change for everybody else. But if I go and I want to join some organization, these are the rules. These are the rules. Well, would you change it for me? And they'll say no. But when it comes to church, we're supposed to change all the rules. And I don't see where Jesus does that in Scripture. I see where what he does is he says, these are the rules. This, and it isn't even the rules. I'm using that metaphorically. This is the way, walk in it. Follow me.
Right.
I'm not going to follow you. He tells us to follow him.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean we just play follow leader. We do, but it's not just for the sake of following. We're following him to learn, to be transformed, to be changed. And it will look different. It will, but that is the narrow way is a hard way. I don't like working out. I don't like eating well, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do. Because it is easy. That's an easier way. Yeah. Why do we buy processed food? Because it's easy.
Just easy.
Yeah. So, and we do the same thing in our spiritual walk. We don't want God to ask too much of us because that would make us uncomfortable.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We want to continue, and I see, Andy, you see it too, and I do too. We see people over and over again. How many of them go to the hospital? Heart attack or whatever, diabetes, whatever. The doctor says you got to change your diet, and they won't do it.
Yep.
They won't do it. People will change when it hurts more to stay the same than it does to change.
And then it might be too late.
And part of what we want is we want an easy Christianity. And I just said it in one of my recordings is that, Jesus said, take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy. It's easy when we do it with him. It's easier, it's easier in the sense of with him it's easy. With him, without him, it's not easy.
Yep.
And so I think part of the thing is we want the best of both worlds. We see Christianity as fire insurance.
Yeah.
We don't see it as a way of life.
So I love what you just said, a way of life, right? We don't see it as a way of life because one of the tenets of Christianity is be different, right? Be different. Be ye perfect as, be holy as I am holy, right? Yeah. This whole idea. And we're supposed to be different.
Yeah.
And that is supposed to aid us in our ability to talk with other people, right? They are surprised that you're not doing the things that they're doing.
Right.
Well, again, we went through a time down here, we're talking about the I Need Jesus t-shirts. And I was explaining to somebody yesterday, it's not just about wearing the I Need Jesus t-shirt. It's hopefully somebody will see you with the t-shirt and they will say to you, why do you need Jesus? Mm-hmm. And then you're prepared to say, here's the deal. Here's what happens most of the time, though. Even if somebody asks us, why do you need the t-shirt? Why do you need Jesus? We say to them, well, doesn't everybody need Jesus? We make it generic, and they're like, well, okay, well, how do you argue with that? Well, yeah, everybody needs Jesus. The whole concept is to stand out so that you might get an opportunity to be able to tell people why they need Jesus, why you need Jesus. But we fight against that, right? Mm-hmm. We fight against that. I love what you said, because we simply want things to be easy.
Well, and here's another, so let's talk about what you just said. We don't always want to talk about Jesus.
No.
Because, well, I might lose my friends.
Yep.
We're more concerned about losing our friends than our friends being lost.
I was just talking to a lady last night, and she said that when her first child was born, things were good, but pretty soon they recognized something was wrong. Mm-hmm. She went to the doctor. The doctor diagnosed their son with autism. pretty severe. He looked at her and he said, I just want you to know you're going to lose people over this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she looked at him and she said, I said, no, I won't. Just sure that her friends were her friends. And sure enough, lost a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't be in the sight of imperfection, be reminded of imperfection.
Yeah.
That's a lot of where our people are.
Which is funny because you brought up, and I'm more of the Wesleyan persuasion, that perfection language. John Wesley wrote a book, A Plain Account of Christian Perfection.
Mm-hmm.
People get hung up on, which is very interesting to me, because we want perfection in everything else. We want perfection even in our worship.
Absolutely.
We want perfection in the pastor's sermon. It better be the best sermon he ever preaches. But we balk at it when we say, well, God wants perfection in you. Now, the problem is we don't understand what the word means. It can be translated completeness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the interesting thing is we want everything perfect. We want our lives perfect, but wait a minute, we don't want God to point out to us and be like Jesus, which means, well, that's not the perfection I want.
No, we don't. Again, here's the visual that I have. When you put something in a moving stream, over time, that thing starts to get smooth in nature where the water is rubbing against. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the concept with us. As we go against stream, God is, He is smoothing the rough edges. He is developing us into who we want to be. He's forming something.
Right. Yeah. And it's easy to walk with the stream,
float.
I kayak a little bit, or go back to my sailing analogy, that I use. It's there's an art to turning the sail in such a way that it can get you to go back when you got to go back where you're going, because otherwise the wind's just going to take you one direction. You got to know how to go sideways and work your way back.
So crazy.
And something I do not know how to do, by the way. But there's more pressure and tension going against. If you're kayaking or canoeing and you're going back upstream, which is why when you do it, when we go on a yearly trip with a guy in our church, and it's fun going down the Allegheny River. Is that Allegheny down there in Warren?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's easy to go down. But what do? We leave someone there with the kayaks. We go back, get the car, because we don't want to go back upstream.
Yep.
Which, in many cases, it's not. Excuse me. You could do.
Yep.
But there's some spots that it's pretty hard. You're going to get tired.
You might have to get out and carry it.
You might have to get out and carry it for a little bit and go over to things. It's easier to walk it than to go up the car. So it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yep.
It was like a lady I know that she goes to the gym. And she goes, well, I only work out until I start to sweat, and then I stop because I don't like to sweat. I'm like, wait a minute, doesn't that defeat the purpose? That's where we are in our Christianity. When it starts getting tough, that's when we go off to the sidelines or something, and we say, well, gosh, I don't know. Or I was talking to a pastor one time, and things started going rough at his church, and he went into the ministry later in life, and he left his church. He goes, but I didn't sign up for all those problems. I said, yeah, you did.
You did.
Yeah, you did. And when you answered that call, you signed up for the good, the bad, and the ugly.
If you're pastoring well, you're going to reveal some of those problems.
Those things
that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Well, lots for you to chew on. I guess the big question here is, are you going against stream or are you floating down the stream? Right? Like, where are you? Are you sitting on the sideline going, I don't really want to go against stream, nor do I really want to be going downstream? And then you're lukewarm, and that's a problem all in its own. Yeah. So you got to be able to answer this, right? Lots of us love to answer this question with, well, sometimes, just like Pastor Mark did, sometimes I eat well, sometimes I exercise, sometimes I don't. Well, sometimes is going to see yourself down the stream quite a bit, having to backtrack continually. So think about that, chew on that. We'll see you next time right here on Counterculture.
Grace and peace.